Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big day of our show for you. Today, we're going to take you around the world of college football, reviewing a wild week one with lots of crazy performances, last minute wins, and a couple of major upsets as well. Then we'll take a look at my top 25 for this week. Usually the AP top 25 comes out on Sunday. This week it comes out on Tuesday because they have a game tonight between Florida State and Florida State plays tonight. So they wait until Tuesday for this week only. Florida State takes on Boston College tonight. Then we're going to go over our very first NFL Power Rankings. We're going to do that every single Monday throughout the season. Today, we're going to give you our first list 32-1. But before we get into college football, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for taking the time on a beautiful Labor Day to talk some sports with me. But like I was saying, we are going to get a little bit into a review of college football from this weekend. And we're going to start with the number one team in the nation. Georgia continued to be Georgia. They proved why they were the number one team in the nation heading into this week, curb stomping Clemson, absolutely destroying them. It looked like it was going to be a tight game through the first half. It was 6-0 Georgia after the first two quarters were in the books there. The defense for both teams were playing out of their minds. But then Georgia in the locker room figured it out. They scored 14 points in each of the next two quarters, ending up winning by a total score of 34-3, outscoring them 28-3 in the second half. It was just a masterclass, especially defensively for Kirby Smart's Georgia Bulldogs. They went out there and they proved against a team in Clemson that was supposed to be much improved this year. You know, they had a lot of returners. They don't use the transfer portal, which is going to get Dabo Swinney into a lot of trouble that he might already find himself in. Dabo Swinney has taken kind of a moral stance, I guess, against the transfer portal, a way where you take a look at what he does, and it seems like if he could just use the transfer portal, this is a team that could be really good. We see teams like Louisville, which we'll get into later, teams like Florida State, teams like Boise State that get, a lot of great recruits through the portals. They turn their teams into top 25 programs or programs that are in playoff contention through this portal. Ole Miss, another one of these teams that relies on the portal a lot. Now, you don't need to be a Colorado, and you don't need to just rely solely on the portal, but Dabo Swinney needs to adapt. He needs to be able to use the portal as an option, as opposed to just getting taken from in the portal. It is a net loss every single season for Clemson, and we're starting to see that. And I think Dabo Swinney's on the hot seat now. Even though he won that championship, it's starting to run sour because he just refuses to adapt. And if you refuse to adapt, you're going to get left behind. And he needs to learn that. Clemson needs to learn that. And hopefully for Clemson, this game was a wake-up call for them because they're not going to win anything. They're not going to compete seriously for anything if they don't start using the transfer portal at least a little bit. At least get your toes wet in there. Use it as an option. Don't just shut it out entirely. Outside of Georgia, there were a couple other top 25 matchups that I want to take a look at. First one that took place was between Notre Dame and Texas A&M. And this one took place on Saturday. This one was very low scoring. The defenses for both of these teams really stepped up. Notre Dame's defense was awesome. They made Texas A&M's quarterback look awful. Carter Wegman was supposed to be a solid quarterback for A&M, but we always feel like A&M has this hype, right? A&M always comes in with all of these resources. They had a really good defensive line, and I want to give the defense their flowers because the defense played really good, holding Riley Leonard to 158 yards passing. They only ended up giving up 18 first downs. It's just the turnover battle really hurts here. They end up losing 23-13 in a game where it really could have gone either way. This was a game that we saw Notre Dame really pull ahead at the end in the fourth quarter specifically. They were tied at halftime. They were only down 7 heading into the fourth, and then all of a sudden at the end of that fourth quarter they give up 10 straight unanswered points. 10 straight points with under 2 minutes to go, putting this game away. A&M just needs to figure out how to close. They need to get some better quarterback play. Their defense is solid. Notre Dame looked really good, though. I was a lot lower on Notre Dame, and their defense especially came out and impressed me. Need to see a little more out of an offense, but they got it. They drew a tough matchup, and good on them for winning. And the other game, the exciting USC versus LSU matchup that took place last night, the Sunday nightcap between USC and LSU, 23-13. USC, led by Miller Moss, took this game at the last second, scoring a touchdown with 8 seconds to go in the game on a 13-yard run. They were just trying to set up for a game-winning field goal at that point. Go ahead and score. End the game on as close to a walk-off touchdown as just about as close to a walk-off touchdown as you can possibly get. Both of these offenses looked really good. I was very, very impressed with Miller Moss. When you take a look at what he did last night, compare it, both of these teams went through a lot of changes. And outside of the quarterbacks, Newsmeyer and Miller Moss both put up really good performances, continuing from their really good bowl performances last year. But the defenses for both of these teams, I was impressed with. Now, they both gave up over 400 yards, but these are both super high-powered offenses. The fact that they both were able to keep each other under 30 points is extremely impressive. These two teams have a lot to look forward to this season. USC, their defense made drastic improvements. They weren't kidding when they said they were going to change their philosophy and actually play defense this season. Now, obviously, we all saw Brian Kelly's reactions through hitting a table, getting all angry about this game. This is a tough opponent. USC is a very, very good team. They're a team that, again, Lincoln Riley is there. He's always going to produce QB talent. Miller Moss is no different. Miller Moss has quietly been waiting his turn in the wings for USC for 2-3 years at this point. He finally gets his chance, and he shows up, shows out. He looks like one of the best quarterbacks all week. Outside of those matchups, there was a couple more that I wanted to touch on. First of all, Miami absolutely trounces Florida, a game that people thought would be close. It had a 2.5-point spread. Miami makes Florida look awful, and there was locker room. The stuff in the locker room after that Florida game does not look good for Billy Napier and that team. He was already on the hot seat. Florida has one of, if not the most brutal schedules in the entire country, especially down the stretch. And they just get absolutely dogged on their own home field against a in-state rival in Miami. And Miami was trying to steal their recruits too. Cam Ward looked awesome. He didn't look like anything could faze him in that game, in a tough environment, one of the toughest to play in all of college football. He looked really, really good. So did the entirety of Miami. That defense stepped up. They didn't let Florida really get anything done at all. As well as, of course, the offense putting up 41 points on a Florida team that, well, they weren't super stacked on offense or defense. They were still supposed to be better. This was supposed to be a close game. Miami looks like a real title contender in week 1. They played one of the tougher opponents. We'll talk about how much that moved them up in the rankings from 19, at least in my personal rankings, when we get into that in the next segment. But before we end out on this, there were 2 players that I wanted to highlight, and I couldn't go over a week 1 review without talking about them. The first one is wide receiver T-Mac from Arizona. He puts up a crazy stat line. Not a normal stat line, Madden numbers, college football 25 numbers. He puts up, he puts up 4 touchdowns, 3 of them in the first half. It's just insane what he does. He's 6'5", 240, incredibly physical. There's just nothing you can do to stop him. 10 catches, 304 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's 30 yards per reception. He's in Heisman conversation here. Noah Fifita looked really good, especially in that second half after starting off a little bit slow, letting New Mexico stay in the game. And then we had a 6-touchdown performance from Mr. Gentry of Boise State against another team that really went hard in the transfer portal in Georgia Southern, right? These were two teams that kept going back and forth. Boise State ends up pulling it out in a tight one. They win by 12, but it was very tight down the stretch. Gentry finishes with 6 touchdowns, all on the ground. Incredible performances out of these two. I'm excited to see what they can do for the rest of the season. There's a lot of season, though, to keep up on, and we'll break down a lot more than just those games. We'll talk about a whole bunch of teams. Again, it's week 1. They scheduled a lot of FCS opponents. We'll talk about a top 25. I put together a top 25 for you this week. We're going to go over everything that happened and why I have them ranked where they are. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over some of the major highlights from around week 1 in college football. That has been all but in the books now, as we have only one game left to play this week, technically between Florida State and Boston College tonight. But even though we do have one more game to go, I am putting out a top 25 list, and this is before the AP 25 poll comes out. That's going to come out tomorrow, I believe, around noonish. We'll go over their ranking, see how close we were when to my consensus when that comes out. Florida State might go up or down depending on how they do tonight as well. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with the message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate you guys spending your Labor Day with me talking some sports. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of the NCAA top 25 list, not the AP poll, my personal top 25. And starting at the top, it has to be Georgia. Georgia was the number 1 team ranked last week. They didn't do anything to suggest that they shouldn't be ranked at the top. They played one of the toughest teams this week. You know, there were only 3 ranked versus ranked matchups this week. Georgia had one of them. They absolutely decimate Clemson, send them back, send them packing in extremely convincing fashion on what technically was a neutral field, although it wasn't Atlanta, so we'll call it a home game for the Dogs. They take that number 1 spot pretty convincingly, not very surprisingly. Texas gets number 2. They're up 2 spots from number 4. Texas looked like the most complete team outside of Georgia. Even Georgia started slow. Texas, from start to finish, was just dominating in their game. We even got to see Arch Manning get get some playing action. He threw for a touchdown on a little bit of a sideways shuffle pass. Texas takes that number 2 spot. Down 1 from number 2 is Ohio State. They started off slow. Again, because of that, I had Texas move up above them, but Ohio State, their offense looks good. Their offense looks like they got it fixed. Will Howard, now it wasn't the most convincing performance, but it's better than last year by a very, very large margin. They're able to win in convincing fashion. They move down 1 spot to number 3. Up 1 from 5, we have Alabama sitting at our number 4 rank. Alabama is in an interesting spot. Obviously, they no longer have Coach Nick Saban. We have Kalen DeBoer now as the head coach. He comes in, gets the job done. They almost shut out. They shut out their opponent. We had a 17-year-old kid as well put up 2 touchdowns on 2 catches. This team's going to be good. Jalen Milroe looks solid. Now, we don't want to overreact. Again, our goal is not to overreact too much to week 1, although some of these I might have overreacted a little bit. Week 1, they don't play the strongest opponents. We take a look at the strength of schedule, and a lot of these teams are playing FCS schools. A lot of these teams are playing lowly ranked FBS teams. Even though these are crushing defeats, Alabama beats Western Kentucky 63-0. It's still Western Kentucky. It's not like they played another ranked team. They looked really good, though. We just don't want to overreact. At 5, we have Notre Dame. This is an exception. They played a really good team. They played Texas A&M. Texas A&M that we talked about in the first segment, their defense held them down for a little bit, and I want to give credit to the Texas A&M defense rather than discredit the Notre Dame offense. That should get better. Riley Leonard looked solid even though he was getting bogged down a lot. This is a good Notre Dame team. They're up 2 spots to number 5. Ole Miss stands pat at number 6. Ole Miss beats Furman 76-0. That offense is as advertised. Hard to tell about the defense. That's going to be the big thing for Ole Miss. Again, Furman, not the greatest school. We love the Paladins, but they're not the greatest. They're not the greatest football team. Going up against a top 10 ranked opponent was never going to go good for them. They get shut out 76-0. The biggest win of the day, for what it's worth, or the biggest win of the week even. But Ole Miss stays at 6. At number 7, we have Penn State. Penn State didn't play another ranked opponent, but they did play a team that people were kind of putting them on upset watch. I thought they would win, but I didn't think they would do it in such convincing fashion. Penn State goes to West Virginia, takes them down on the road 34-12. And Drew Aller looked really good. That was my big concern with this team. Penn State's defense always looks great. Their defense is always going to be really good, but it was the offense I was concerned about. Drew Aller last year did not do enough to really get anything going offensively. This year, they're pushing the ball downfield. It wasn't always the greatest decision, but it worked. The offense looks a lot more explosive. Drew Aller finishes the game with 11 for 17 passing, 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's with a long delay in between. At halftime, I believe it was raining. They had to delay the game for a while. There were a lot of games that ended up getting delayed, but the Penn State defense did its thing. They never really were in any danger. It was a little sloppy to begin, but this is the first game. You're always expecting a little bit of sloppiness, but Penn State is up a spot to number 7. At number 8, we have Oregon. They're down 5 spots. And again, I don't want to overreact too much, but they only win by 10 points. They were favored by almost 30 against an Idaho team that is not like that, right? This is a team that killed it in NIL specifically. And if you look at the stats, it doesn't make a lot of sense how they ended up with only 24 points. They only turned the ball over 1 time. They controlled the possession 40 minutes to 20 minutes. They had 487 yards of total offense compared to 217 from Idaho. And they were in control this whole game, and yet they only put up 24 points, which is concerning. Dylan Gabriel goes 41 of 49, 380 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But again, it's that 2 touchdown number that has me concerned. This is a game where at the beginning of the fourth quarter, it was a one possession game, 14-7. At near the end of the fourth quarter, less than 10 minutes to go in this game, it was a 3-point game. Once Idaho scored that touchdown in the fourth quarter to make it 14-17, this was much closer of a game than it should have been. Obviously, even a 10-point final is much closer than it should have been. But there's not a lot of reasons why it ended up like this, right? Oregon looked good. All the numbers are in their favor. They just could not get the ball. They just couldn't get the ball downfield for some reason. And hopefully that changes later on. But they fall down to number 8 in my rankings because of that. At number 9, we have Mizzou. Mizzou climbs up into the top 10. They were ranked at 11 heading in. They win 51-0 over Murray State. They just looked like a really good team. Dominated throughout. Brady Cook looked solid. There's not much more to say. I like this Missouri team a lot, and they won convincingly. There were some teams ahead of them that did not win convincingly. Michigan, Florida State ended up losing. Those were the 2 teams ahead of them, 9-10. I moved them up above those 2. Missouri slots up into that 9 hole. At number 10, Utah. Once again, similar to Missouri, they win 49-0 over Southern Utah. In-state rivalry. Cam Rising is back, and that is huge for them. Cam Rising throws for 5 touchdown passes, only on 15 throws. 10 completions, 5 touchdowns. That is an insane amount of that's an insane amount of explosive plays right there, right? You're not going to throw a touchdown on half of your throws, half of your completions, right? That's not a normal thing. But Cam Rising is here. Utah's defense is real. It always is. Held them to 150 yards of total offense. Utah might be scary. Utah's a scary team. They're in charge of that Big 12 for now. They slide up to the number 10 spot. At number 4, we have at number 11, we have Tennessee. Tennessee comes in, destroys UT Chattanooga 69-3. Their quarterback might have looked like the best quarterback in all of college football this weekend. Now, that's a little bit up for debate. I heard that take a couple times. They were never in danger of losing this game. Of course, they weren't. Tennessee's offense looked good. This Tennessee team might be resurgent. It's a tough SEC, though. They move up to 11. And rounding out the top 12, I have Miami. U of M, we talked about a little bit in the last segment, is just really good at football. Every level of the game, they just dominated against a Florida team that, when you take against a couple of other matchups that these teams in the top 25 have played, it was one of the more formidable opponents, especially heading into the Swamp to play it. They dominated. Cam Ward was not fazed at all. That running game was excellent. There was nothing that Miami could do to stop them, and that Florida could do to stop them. And Miami just looks like one of the best teams in the country right now. They are up 7 spots from 19 to 12, in my opinion. And that's where we're going to take a break. We're going to take a look at the next 12, the bottom half of the top 25 when we come back. But let me know what you have. Let me know what you thought of this list. If you have anything that I was way off on, any guys that you thought I moved way too high up, we're going to take a quick break here. But when we come back, we're going to finish up the top 25 list. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the first half of my NCAA Top 25 list. We are going to finish that up here in this segment. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much taking time out of your busy Labor Day to talk some sports with me. But like I was saying, we are going to finish up the college football top 25 rankings. We'll have an official ranking tomorrow that we will go over as well. But getting back into the list, just to quickly review, Georgia 1, Texas 2, Ohio State 3, Alabama 4, Notre Dame 5, Ole Miss 6, Penn State 7, Oregon 8, Missouri 9, Utah 10, Tennessee 11, and Miami at 12. From there, at 13, I'm putting USC, a massive win, a big day for Miller Moss. Everything that we talked about in the first segment there applies here. They're up 10 spots from 23, taking the spot where LSU was sitting before. I was just really impressed by their defense. Obviously, the offense, Miller Moss, that last second touchdown run is going to steal the headlines, but holding a team like LSU to just 20 points is huge for them. A team that struggled mightily on defense. Miller Moss looked really good in the pocket as well, being able to handle the pressure in his face, make accurate throws throughout the night, not turning the ball over. USC is a dangerous team. They're up 10 spots to 13. At 14, we have Oklahoma. Oklahoma's another one of those teams that just kind of dominated when they were supposed to. They went up and played the Temple Owls, or I should say Temple came to them. They win 51-3. This is exactly what they should. This is exactly what we expect out of them. This is a team that should dominate. This is a team that is just doing its job. They are up 2 spots to replace some teams that did not do their job. Up 2 spots as well, and right behind them, their in-state rivals, the Oklahoma State. Excuse me. Oklahoma State beats a tough FCS opponent. Now, FCS as it is, South Dakota State got handed their first loss in 29 games. They're now 29-1 in their last 30 games. They had won back-to-back national championships at the FCS level. They were a very good team, but it never really got close. We've had issues with Oklahoma State teams keeping it close against lesser opponents. Ollie Gordon went off. He did his thing. He always was going to do his thing. He's a Heisman contender here. Oklahoma State is up 2 spots to number 15. And at 16 is where we finally check in with Michigan, a team that did end up winning their game 30-10 over Fresno State, but it looked really, really bad. They were in danger of losing this game. They kept it really close until the end, where they started to pull away, scoring 2 touchdowns, just scoring 2 touchdowns in the last 6 minutes of the game. They finally looked like they got something clicking, but the offense never really felt like it had anything going. One of those touchdowns was a pick 6 to really put the game out of reach, but this Michigan team really just doesn't have the same juice. The running game, which was supposed to be the running game, never really got it going. They didn't have any of those explosive runs that Michigan is usually built on. They obviously lost a lot of pieces. They lost a head coach. They're under investigation for a lot of different things right now. This is not a good start for a Michigan Wolverines team that kind of needed some momentum. 30-10 victory over Fresno State. I have them dropping 7 spots to 16. Up 4 is Arizona. Arizona's up 4 from 21, sitting at 17 in my rankings. I love this Arizona team. I was high on them. I believe I had them. I had them predicted to get to the playoffs here as well. Arizona is one of those teams that could go on a run. Obviously, with Ted McMillan, T-Mac doing his thing, 4 touchdowns, 304 yards. That's unnatural. Now, going up against New Mexico, it's not a great opponent, but being able to dominate so thoroughly, especially in that second half, the defense kind of locked in. And we saw what Noah Fifita and T-Mac could do as a combo. That's a scary team, especially their offense. Now, they're going to get in a lot of shootouts. Their defense is a little shaky. But if that offense can keep it up, there's not a lot of teams that can keep up with them. At 18, we have K-State, Kansas State. Again, they did their thing. They're standing pat at where they were. They beat up on UT Martin 41-6. Just a really solid game from K-State. There were issues, of course. You start off a little bit slower than you would have liked. It wasn't domination the entire way out, only putting up 3 points in that second quarter. But this is a team that is proving why they're up there in the conversation with the Big 12, with Arizona and Utah as well. At 19 is where LSU check in. Our first 0-1 team of the day. They fall down to 19, 6 spots down in the rankings. And they'd only fall minimally 6 spots because USC is a very good team. Probably the best 2 opponents that played each other this entire week was LSU, USC. LSU ends up losing. One of them had to end up losing. LSU only falls 6 spots. Again, I talked about it a little bit in the first segment, but LSU is a very good team. I was impressed with their defense. I was impressed with their quarterback play. Their offense still has a long way to go. There's still a lot of room for improvement on this LSU team, but this is an LSU team that still deserves to be in the top 25. They played a tough game at a neutral site, and they took it to the wire. This is a game that both teams played really well in. So they stay in the top 25, stay in the top 20, LSU down to 19. At number 20, we have Kansas. Again, just another team that took care of business against a team they were supposed to take care of business against. The number 22 ranked Kansas Jayhawks just dominated the whole game. Kansas State moves up 2 spots. Again, we're starting to get to these teams that lost. Kansas was better than those teams that lost to teams that were unranked. They were just a little lower on the rankings. 48-3 over Lindenwood. No reason to move them down. They're up 2 spots to number 20. At 21, we have Florida State. Here we are, another 0-1 team, and we'll see if they've improved. Maybe the game in Ireland was a fluke. They played a solid Georgia Tech team, that is on the rise. They're 2-0 now, in consideration to possibly make that jump into the top 25. We'll see what happens as we get lower down on these rankings. But Florida State at 21, they're still a really good team. There's a lot of things that they need to work on, and we'll see tonight if the game in Ireland was just a fluke. I'm keeping them in the top 20 for now, but they're down 11 spots to 21. That might change. I might have to redo the rankings after tonight, though. At 22, Iowa moves up 3 spots. Iowa scored 40 points, and that is the most amount of points that they've scored in over 2 seasons. They had 3 receiving touchdowns by a wide receiver or a tight end. That is tied for the most that they've had in any of the last 2 seasons. They had 2 in 2022, 3 in 2023. That is a ridiculously low number. The defense continued to do its thing. They started slow. It wasn't perfect, but the offense is going a little bit. And if they can keep this momentum up, maybe clean things up a little bit. They had a bunch of turnover-worthy plays that just did not get turned over. Maybe they can do some things. At number 23, I have Texas A&M. Texas A&M falls 3 spots. They played a really good Notre Dame team. We talked about how I really liked their defense, what they were able to hold really the entirety of that Notre Dame offense to just 23 points, a lot of that coming in the last 2 minutes. kind of collapsed there at the end. That defensive line is one of the best in the country. Maybe they can get a little support from the offense. If they can hold a team like Notre Dame to 20 points, they should be able to win most games. So I'm keeping them in the top 25. And then we have another loser. Clemson falls 10 spots to spot 24 on the list, and I really thought about taking them out. But I don't think I could penalize them that harshly because they went up against the number one team in the country. We talked about how Dabo Swinney has his problems, how it's just a mess over there, really. He needs to start using the transfer portal. It really shows in how he's just mismatched against a really strong opponent. But Clemson's a good team. They showed that they could hang tough with Georgia, at least in that first half, until Georgia figured it out. Dabo just needs to use the transfer portal. They're sitting in at 24. And at 25, we have our first new team in the top 25. Louisville, a team that I'm really high on, jumps into the top 25. I know maybe you thought it should be Georgia Tech there. They're the first team out for me, actually. But Louisville jumps in. They're a team that I've been really high on. They win 62-0 in week 1. Now, we saw Florida State, that reliance on the transfer portal, sometimes it backfires. Louisville looked really good. Lots of things were clicking. They're real title contenders in the ACC, especially with everything else that's been going on outside of Miami. The ACC is a mess. Louisville might be able to make some noise there. That means NC State is a team that falls out of the top 25. They end up getting a 38-21 victory over a team that they probably should have beat by more. I'm just not convinced by NC State. A couple other teams I thought about putting into the top 25. We'll put this in the receiving votes section. Georgia Tech, of course, a big win over Georgia State, a big win over Florida State. That's two straight solid wins. Georgia State obviously not as much up there as Florida State is. We'll see where Florida State is after here, but Georgia Tech is sitting at that 26th ranked spot for me. Nebraska, Dylan Raiola looked really good. You got those Patrick Mahomes comparisons, obviously training with him. Looks a lot like him. Where's his number? Where's the right color? Dylan Raiola looks solid for Nebraska. Boise State also looked really good. We talked about Gentry scoring 6 touchdowns last over the weekend on Saturday. Insane performance to keep them ahead of Georgia Southern. Another solid Sun Belt team. Sun Belt is a pretty good Group of 5 conference this year. Boise State, NC State, Nebraska, Georgia Tech all get those receiving vote section, but Louisville ends up at spot 25 for me at least. Let me know what you think of my list. Georgia won, Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Penn State, Oregon, Missouri, Utah are the top 10. If there's anything you thought I was way off on, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to start an NFL Power Rankings. We got 32-1 here today. We're going to go through the preseason Power Rankings. We're going to do this every single Monday. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over my NCAA Top 25 list. If you want to go and check that out, it'll be posted on YouTube, or you can go a little further back in this video. In this segment here, we are going to get into a power ranking for the NFL. We'll get 1 through 6 or 30 through 32. through 17, and then 16-1 to close out the show. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, again, that message should pop up. I appreciate anything you guys do give. If you have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Thanks for taking time out of your Labor Day to talk some sports with me. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NFL Power Rankings. First time, preseason Power Rankings. It's been a bit. We usually do our MLB of this, but we're on to the NFL. Every single Monday, we'll have new NFL Power Rankings. This is the preseason one as the season starts on Thursday. We had our first injury report. The only one that's on there is Hollywood Brown right now, but we'll get into all of that later. Sitting at the 32 spot in the NFL Power Rankings are the New England Patriots. The Patriots are just a mess of a team right now. They traded away some of their best defensive talent. Some of their other great defensive talent is out indefinitely with blood clots. The quarterback situation is a mess. The offensive line might be the worst in football. The wide receiver core also might be the worst in football. They're just not in a good spot. The Patriots sit at number 32 on the list. At 31, we have Bryce Young and the Panthers. Now, I do believe in Bryce Young this year. I think he's a guy that this is a make it or break it year for him. We did a top 5 list of that about a month ago, if I had to guess. He was, I think, number 3 on that list for me. Bryce Young is a guy that needs to show up and show out. They went out, they got him weapons. They upgraded the offensive line a little bit. The defense, I'm still worried about. This is not a great team, but it is an improved team. They're better than the Patriots, I think, this season. They start off at 31. At 30, we have the Denver Broncos. They're also going through a transitional period. They have to deal with the contract of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, who they owe $85 million in dead cap to, not on the team anymore, currently the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Broncos are in a mess. Bo Nix is a guy that looked solid in the preseason. I'm not sold on him, though. Offensive line is fine. You've got fine weapons. The defense is going to be a whole nother discussion. The defense is a mess. The defense is not going to be easy to fix. Outside of Pat Surtain, there's no one on that defense that I trust or think is going to be on that team much longer. They lost a lot of their key guys. The Broncos slide in at number 30. At 29, we have the New York Giants. The Giants are here because of their quarterback situation. Daniel Jones is not enough to carry Devin Singletary, and the rest of that offense. You have Malik Neighbors, a really solid player, gets a number unretired, gets number 1 unretired, which was the first number the Giants ever retired. That's an interesting discussion right there on its own, but they clearly believe in him. He's going to be good. The defense, I think, will be solid. You have one of the more formidable defensive lines in all of football. Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari. This is a really good defensive line. The corner could use a little bit of depth there. Safeties, you're relying on some young guys. Linebackers, up and down on there. But the defensive line is really good. So there are some positives here. They slot in at 29. At 28, I have the Tennessee Titans. And all of their season really relies on the arm of Will Levis. Will Levis showed a lot of flashes, but he also showed a lot of he's not ready yet last year. He led a lot of really great drives. They went out, they got him weapons to pair with DeAndre Hopkins. Excuse me. They brought in Calvin Ridley. They brought in Tyler Boyd. They let Derrick Henry go. They're making that transition to more of a passing team. They upgraded the offensive line. Lloyd Cushenberry comes in to play center. That is a great, great move. They also draft a tackle as well, right? This is a Titans team that did their best to protect Will Levis, bringing Tony Pollard, keeping Tyjae Spears around. This is going to be a passing offense much more than it was when they had when Vrabel was coaching, Mike Vrabel was coaching. It's a lot more of a passing offense. Now they slot into 28. At 27, we have the Raiders. And again, weird quarterback situation. I like Gardner Minshew just fine, but he's not going to blow the socks off of anyone. Maybe Aiden O'Connell comes in halfway through the season. It's a mess over there in Las Vegas. The Raiders are at spot 27. At 26, we have the Vikings. They're a very talented team. Maybe the best receiver in football, Justin Jefferson. Some of the best talent to pair with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson when he gets healthy. I really like Aaron Jones. That offensive line is solid, but quarterback is Sam Darnold. And that in itself is a big enough problem. I don't really love the Vikings' chances this year, but we've seen weird journeyman quarterbacks be good for the Vikings in the past. So maybe that changes. At 25, I have the Chargers. The Los Angeles Chargers are going through another state of change. They still have their quarterback, but Jim Harbaugh comes in. He is switching them to a run culture. We talk about the Titans switching to a pass culture. The Chargers are coming in and running the ball. They bring in 2 running backs from Baltimore, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. They shore up the offensive line, bring in a bunch of blocking tight ends, let all the wide receivers go. This is going to be an interesting team to watch because the defense is kind of a mess and they're going to play kind of chew clock a little bit as well with their offensive style. I'm not sure how that's going to go, but I don't think it's going to work this season. Maybe next year they'll really take that turn because Jim Harbaugh tends to win wherever he goes. Chargers are at 25. At 24, I have the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are a team that I really like. I love their offense. Kyler Murray should be back for the whole season. You add Marvin Harrison Jr., you have Trey McBride. Greg Dortch is a solid weapon. The offensive line could be better, but the defense is really what drags them down. They're going to have one of the worst defenses in the league. They'll win games because they have a dynamic offense, but the defense is really going to be an issue for the Cardinals this year. At 23, I have the Saints. And the Saints, I think, are kind of the epitome of an average team. Now, they're on the decline, but they just don't have anything that really stands out. What stands out on that team? Derek Carr? No. The wide receivers, Chris Olave is solid, but is he really going to stand out amongst the top wide receivers in the league? Not really. Alvin Kamara used to, but he, after what he did last season, is not at the top echelon of running backs anymore. The defense, there's no one on there that I'm really excited for. I love the addition of Willie Gay, but that's not going to make their defense a top defense in the league. Marcus Davenport is still there, but again, there's nothing flashy about this team. This team is just a bunch of guys that are slightly over the hump, I believe. And the guys that aren't enough to really make a winning team. The Saints are sliding in at number 23. At 22, we have the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels, I'm very excited to see. I think he's going to be really good for this team. The Commanders are youthful. They've got a lot of great weapons. I think the Commanders are going to surprise a lot of people this year. They're at 22. At 21, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Quarterback. That's the question with them, right? We know they're going to have an elite defense. We know that their running backs are going to be solid. I just don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be, how it's going to play out. Right now, it's Russell Wilson. I don't know how long that'll last. I don't know how he'll perform. I don't know if he'll be able to bounce back behind what has been a pretty bad offensive line, although it was revamped, so maybe they just needed more time to play with each other. We'll see what happens. The Steelers are at 21. At 20, we have the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks have a new head coach, Mike Macdonald. I love Mike Macdonald. Geno Smith is a guy I like. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They've got a lot of pieces I like. They're just not quite there. The defense needs a little bit of work. They updraft Byron Murphy in the first round, should shore up the defensive line. The corners kind of fell off a cliff last year, though. We'll see if they can return to form. At 19, we have the Bucs. Baker Mayfield, if he can do what he does, this is a little low, but I think he's going to regress a little bit from last year. He just tends to regress after having people believe in him again. So he feel like he's a guy that needs that chip on his shoulder. Maybe the Bucs will be good. I just don't believe in them this year, honestly. At 18, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. They collapsed at the end of last season, leaving a sour taste in everybody's mouth. Trevor Lawrence gets paid. The defense is in shambles, basically, especially the secondary is a mess over there for Jacksonville. But the offense, I think, should be good. They lose Calvin Ridley. They bring in Gabe Davis. That's a net negative, I think. But Trevor Lawrence should be healthy. And when healthy, Trevor Lawrence is a guy that has MVP potential. The Jaguars slide in at 18. Finishing off the first half of this list, at number 17, we have the Chicago Bears, led by Caleb Williams, the first overall pick, and the plethora of weapons that the Bears have put around him. That defense is going to be really solid, too. I love that defense. The Bears go as Caleb Williams goes this season. He'll be good. I just don't know if he's going to be ready this year. I don't know if he's going to really show up as much as he possibly can in his rookie season. It's a tough thing to do, but the Bears are at 17. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go over the top 16 to 1, break down the top teams in the NFL Power Rankings. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just finished going over the first half of the NFL Power Rankings. We're going to finish that up starting at 16 to 1 for the top half of our NFL Power Rankings. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for taking the time out of your Labor Day to talk some sports with me here on the Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. But we're going to finish off our show today in style, finishing off the NFL Power Rankings. Starting at number 16, we have the Colts, led by Anthony Richardson. He's a guy that I really believe in. One of the most polarizing, most burning questions, I would say, of the NFL this year is what Anthony Richardson will be, because he will go, or the Colts will go as he goes, right? Anthony Richardson could be an MVP candidate. He gets comps to Cam Newton. He gets comps, to all these great quarterbacks before him. He has all these physical tools, but we haven't seen it yet. He could also flop, right? This is a guy that I think will be really good, but I understand if people don't. I'm being cautious putting them at 16 for now. At 15, we have the Bills. Josh Allen is going to be great. Josh Allen is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, but the rest of the Bills team is not up to standard, especially the defense. You could handle it, all the losses they had. You probably could a little bit, but losing Matt Milano to injury before the season starts, once again, is a gut punch. Matt Milano, when he's on the field, that Bills defense is so much better. It's worlds better than when he is not on the field. That hurts because they've already lost their secondary, the entirety of it. You lose Tre'Davious White due to cap reasons. Same thing for Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, right? Your safety duo, your top corner, these are all gone. This is a stripped down Buffalo Bills defense, and it's not going to be enough. Josh Allen's not going to be enough to really propel them to the top 10 this year. The Bills are in at 15. At 14, I have the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams have a healthy offense now. They do lose Aaron Donald, but Matthew Stafford's supposed to be healthy. You get a healthy Cooper Kupp for the full season. This is going to be a not fun offense to go against. They have a really good linebacker core. They just traded one of their best linebackers away, but they already have a replacement who went off in the preseason. This is a really good Ram team. They slot in at number 14. At 13, we have the Falcons. They were a solid team. They have a really solid offensive line, one of the best corners, one of the best safety duos. You bring in Matthew Judon to fix a pass rush that's been anemic for almost 10 years now. Now, you also have Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins come in with Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. This is a really good Falcons team. They slot in at 13. At 12, we have the Browns, and this is another quarterback question. Is Deshaun Watson going to be able to return to form? I personally lean towards no, but that defense is so good, I can't slot them really much lower than I have them right now. Myles Garrett is going to do his thing, maybe win back-to-back Defensive Players of the Year. We'll see. We'll do an awards prediction later on this week. At 11, I have the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys just miss out on the top 10 because their running back room is abysmal. The offensive line, I think, took a hit as well, but the rest of that team is really good. You lose Deron Bland for a little while. That sucks. But a running back room of Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, and Rico Dowdle are not inspiring as you head towards a season that Dak is going to ask for $65 million at the end of it. This feels like the end of the window, even if they are ready and willing to sign Dak to that big of a contract extension. This really feels like the last kind of hurrah for this team, and I don't think they're quite going to make it. At 10, we have the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love gets himself a nice big contract. The Packers are kind of set. They go about 6 deep with a bunch of really young wide receivers. I expect a couple of those guys to really take the next step this year. The defense is going to be really good, led by Jair Alexander. This Packers team is one of the best in the entire NFC. At 9, we have the Eagles. They play the Packers Friday night in Brazil. The Eagles add Saquon Barkley, and I can get over, I think, their collapse last season because this is a team that's just too good. Hopefully the whole drama between Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts is overblown. With that, then the Eagles could be good, but if not, this is dangerous situation for the Eagles to be in. They're just on the fringe of the top 10 at number 9. At 8, we have the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans sit at number 8. CJ Stroud had one of the best rookie quarterback seasons in the history of the NFL. Maybe better than Andrew Luck's. This was really, really good. The Texans are atop their division right now. They add Stephon Diggs. The defense improves. DeMeco Ryans, one of the best defensive coordinators a couple years ago, breaks into the league breaks into the head coaching ranks immediately. He's a finalist for the Coach of the Year there. The Texans are going to be really good. But there are some worries because this is such a young team. We need to see CJ Stroud do it again. I'm not too concerned. The Texans are very good. They slot in at 8. At 7, the New York Jets. I am an Aaron Rodgers believer. A lot of people aren't, and that's fine. We haven't seen him really play football in a whole year. But just 2 years ago, he was still considered a top 10 quarterback, and you add a top 10 quarterback to the Jets with a team that has an elite defense at all 3 levels. They got some nice weapons. Garrett Wilson is still there. Breece Hall is still there. Add Mike Williams. This is a team that is flush with weapons right now. And the Jets, if they just had competent quarterback play, they would have made the playoffs last year. And Aaron Rodgers is going to give you more than competent quarterback play. They slot in at 7. At 6, I have their division rival, the Miami Dolphins. Tua locked into a massive contract. Tyreek Hill is one of the best receivers in the league. That offense is going to go, just like they did last year. They extend head coach Mike McDaniel. Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. I heard a couple people say it wasn't worth it, which I don't understand. How are you not convinced on him? He did everything you want a head coach to do. The Dolphins are in at number 6. And now we've reached our top 5. At number 5, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow returning from injury. That defense, this is the last year I think it's truly going to be really good. Trey Hendrickson is probably gone. So is T. Higgins after this year. We don't know what's going on with Jamar Chase. They're down at 5, but with all those pieces there, this is one of the best teams in the NFL. They stick at 5. At 4, the San Francisco 49ers. I can't put them above a couple of these top 3 teams simply because Trent Williams is not playing. And until Trent Williams plays, I don't think the 49ers are a top-tier team in football. Now, or let me rephrase that. I don't think they're the top-tier team in football. They're still a top-tier team, right? You still have everything at every other position. You could go down the list. They're stacked everywhere. Wide receiver, tight end, defense, offensive line, right? They're stacked, but you need Trent Williams there. I think he's their best player. For now, they're at 4, although they could move all the way up to 2 once Trent Williams comes back. At 3, I have the Detroit Lions. I love what they did. They lost a little bit on that wide receiver room. They still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, but they kept their guys. They paid Penei Sewell. They paid Jared Goff. They paid Amon-Ra St. Brown. They paid Decker, right? They built in-house a championship level team, and now they're keeping it together. That's what you got to do. I loved their draft, getting a couple corners. It's a lot of youth, but I think the Lions will be very good. They slot in at number 3. At number 2, I have the Baltimore Ravens, led by MVP Lamar Jackson. You bring in Derrick Henry. This is the best supporting cast he's ever had. Still an elite defense. You lose Patrick Queen, but this defense is still going to be really good. It's not going to be the best in the league like it was last year, but it should be enough, especially with the amount of weapons that the Ravens now have to surround Lamar Jackson with. And finally, at number 1, that means we have the Kansas City Chiefs. The back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions, looking to make a three-peat for the first time in the Super Bowl era. You just can't argue with Patrick Mahomes at 1. They give him weapons, something he didn't have last season. Chris Jones still anchors that defense, a defense that was really solid last year. They did lose L'Jarius Sneed, which is tough, but I still believe in this Chiefs team. Someone has to dethrone them. They're up at 1 until someone can prove that they can beat that team in the playoffs. But let me know what you think. Again, Chiefs 1, Ravens 2, Lions 3, Niners 4, Bengals 5, Dolphins 6, Jets 7, Texans 8, Eagles 9, Packers 10. That's my top 10. You can go listen to the rest of the list further on back in the podcast. But let me know what you think. Anything that I had way too high, way too low, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Throw that in the comments. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about the AP 25 that comes out, do a little bit of NFL predictions, NFC and AFC playoff edition, maybe some awards, and any other major breaking news that happens in the world of sports in the next 24 hours. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Labor Day. Appreciate you all for tuning in, talking some sports with me today. You've been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. See you same time, same place tomorrow. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up bit of drool in my tongue, I feel like it's gonna be a bad day. I'm tired of shit in the coffee.